Hi, my name is Lance. This is the Millennial OFW podcast where we focus on storytelling, real stories from real Filipinos who tried to start a new life abroad. My first guest is a good friend, Kevin. I've known him for a couple of years now. Can you please tell us more about yourself, Kevin? Who you are, where you're currently based?
Sure. So as Lan said, my name's Kevin. I'm currently based in Tokyo, Japan. I live in the city of Setagaya, if you're familiar with that. It's quite near Shibuya. How long have I been living abroad is around like almost 6 years now. This is my sixth year in Japan. Unfortunately, I'm not as fluent in Japanese as I wanted to be.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think Lance and I have known each other for a very long time, but we actually just got to know each other while
Yes.
we were abroad.
Yeah, we went to
Yeah,
the same school,
yeah, we went
but
to the
we
same
were
school.
just, we would just pass each other by. And
True,
yeah.
true, true.
Anyway, great. So I guess the first question I'd like to ask is the trigger point that caused you to decide to move abroad. If you could please describe briefly what you were doing before deciding to move abroad and also share with us what led you to this decision point.
Yeah, so I think unlike most of the W's that we know, I actually didn't have like a set plan to go abroad. Before I was here in Japan, I was working with Accenture Philippines. During that time, they had a huge push to develop Accenture Japan. So what happened was they made my department in the Philippines in Japan. So they sent out an email saying, "Hey, please congratulate so and so who will be leading Accenture Japan's business excellence." Blah blah blah. So I said, "Oh, they're making my department in Japan." So I just decided, "Hey, I am Kevin. I've been working with business excellence for the past 6 years. I also have familiarity with Japanese culture and so and so because I studied Japanese culture as a minor during college. Also, I liked anime and manga as everyone else in my generation. So I had a quite a deep appreciation of Japanese culture. And like 6 months later, I'm in Japan. Fellow OFWs would have like a long plan, right? They go to
Mm.
agencies, they would talk to recruiters and find work abroad. Mine was basically my role got duplicated in Japan. I asked them if I could do the opportunity, and yeah, 6 months later, I'm in Japan. So that was my story.
Right, okay. When you first got to Japan, I'm sure similar to other OFWs, the first day can be quite jarring. So, if you don't mind, what was your first day in Japan like?
Yeah, so before flying to Japan, I had no prior experience flying. My first flight to Japan was my first flight ever. I didn't have any relatives in Japan. I didn't know any friends. I didn't ask them to help me. So what happened was I just packed a bunch of my clothes into like stroller bag, the luggages,
Yeah.
and one gym bag. That's everything I own basically. And then coming to Japan, I do know how to read katakana, hiragana, and some kanji. But the moment you step in, it's quite jarring and overwhelming. The airports here do have like English all
Oh, yeah.
over, so it helps a lot of tourists. And the first thing that, really blew my mind was that trains here are early.
Which is never an occurrence
Yeah,
back home.
it's not a thing in the Philippines. And
No, you line up until the main roads.
uh-huh. So I used to use the MRT to go to work. I used to work
Yes.
in a lot of places like in Cubao, in Mandaluyong, in
Yeah.
Makati, and I lived in Quezon City. So the MRT, was really one of the key ways to get to work. Not the most convenient way and
Yeah.
not the fastest considering,
Yeah.
but it avoided a lot of traffic.
Yes.
So when I was in Japan, I didn't know anything about the transportation system. I didn't really study. So I said, I just swing it. I know how to read, so I'll just read. And
Okay.
when I
Okay.
went there, it says to go to Tokyo, like Google Maps said, to go to Tokyo, you have to go through a train, right? And then the first, of course, I'll click the first thing on top, and the first thing on top is a bullet train from the airport to from Shibuya to Tokyo. But I didn't know there was an actual normal train
So you
that
took the
wasn't the
bullet
bullet
train.
train. But I prepared some amount of money
Yeah,
to spend. So
yeah.
as a newbie, this is the only train to go to Tokyo. So I spent like 10,000 yen on that,
Oh wow. Yeah.
while the normal train would like only be 1,000 yen. So, but
Jeez.
it was an experience. First
Yeah.
time riding a bullet train. It was so fast.
I haven't been
Um,
on one,
yeah, the
so
normal train would take like around 2 hours. The bullet train took me like 35 minutes, and then I
jeez.
am in Tokyo. So I got off the train. I only know that before going to Tokyo, I talked to this real estate company, and I didn't know what a big amount for rent is or what the normal amount of rent
Yes.
is. So I just decided, okay, based on my salary, this is how much I will pay monthly. So I just computed whatever. So I
Yeah.
go to Yoyogi. Yoyogi, it's in Tokyo, and it's where the real estate company is. But I didn't know anything about Yoyogi, so I got off the train with my huge bags and walked towards where I think it got lost twice at that time.
Yeah.
So I was really worried because it was getting late. At the moment I got to Yoyogi Park, I didn't. Well, almost all of the places here have elevators, so I go there, but I didn't know where the place was, so I got lost again. And then when I got there, it was really embarrassing because I was sweaty, super sweaty.
Yeah.
Didn't know how cold it was or how hot it was at that point. So the lady there was laughing at me because I was wearing a Vegeta shirt, where he was really tired, and he said I looked like the
Per-
Vegeta on my shirt,
yeah.
sweating, tired,
Perfect.
all that. So I paid the money. I got the key, and
Yeah.
of course, it's essentially I'm saying, okay, I'm renting this apartment without even looking at it. It was
Yeah.
just hoping against hope that the apartment I got was good,
Yeah.
and it was good. It was
That's
really
good.
really small, but it was nice. It was clean. It was my first time living alone and in an
Yeah.
apartment and whatever. So my apartment was in Suehirocho. It's a place near Akihabara where, of course, where the anime is. So
Yeah.
I go there. And, and the worst thing is the train from Yoyogi Park to Suehirocho is there were no elevators. So I was dying the moment, like it was like a workout for me. Like my shoulders, my back, everything hurt
Oh man.
until
Yeah.
I reached the my place where I took the elevator, and then voila, my first day. And then of course you're new, you're so excited. So whatever. I just put my bags there, change clothes, take a shower, and then I went to Akihabara, and I was awestruck
Yeah.
about everything. Yep.
That's cool, man.
So that was just my first day, and I think I came here at the right before Golden Week. So that
Oh,
means
okay.
Golden Week is like a 1 week holiday in Japan. That's why it's called Golden Week. It's really cool and valuable here.
It's very
And
festive, is it? Or
yeah, so I had a week to settle in
yeah.
around my
Perfect
place.
timing, I guess.
Yeah, worked out. Worked out. I didn't plan it, but it worked out.
Yeah. So I guess because I was gonna ask how you generally felt during this initial period of settling in, and I
Mm-hmm.
can see that definitely some excitement. But was there anything else you felt during that initial time moving to Japan?
Yeah, I was excited, but at the same time, I was worried because, I was trying to flex my Japanese shops during that early days, but communication even now is quite hard because they're not as straight. Cause Japanese people are not very straightforward. So when it comes to work, you have to really know how they communicate and like
Mm,
very be very sensitive to what you say because it might get construed as something else.
mm,
So what I felt during the first day was not just excitement, worry, anxiety, of course,
mm.
but taking a look back now when I talk to people and I tell them how I moved, then they ask me, "Weren't you afraid? Like someone
Yeah,
would,
I get that too.
or someone would you would be homeless, or that the
Yeah,
contract would be wrong, or whatever." Like I said,
yeah,
no, I just talk to people and hope it worked out. Or I didn't even think it wouldn't. It didn't cross my
yeah,
head. So, but now that I'm thinking about it, like, oh my god, I could have,
So many things
yeah,
could have gone wrong.
yeah. I could have been homeless for my first few weeks. Like if I got
Oh,
lost or they didn't do
yeah,
my contract or I missed the place or I
yeah.
lost my luggage or I didn't have anyone to help me, no one to fall back on.
Just knowing that you're on your own. Because
Mm.
like you, when I moved here, I'm based in New Zealand. I didn't know anyone as well, and it didn't really sink in how being on your own really meant. Like if you were stuck or if you had a problem, it's just you. So
Mm.
yeah. And I was curious, did you have like an instinctual need to like meet other Filipinos when you moved to Japan? Because that's a common trend
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
noticed.
That's
Just,
something I was excited to do. Like I found out that I had like batchmates from from the same school. I was so excited to meet other Filipinos in work,
yeah,
but not so much outside of it. Because
yeah.
the standard is like Filipinos here are like blue collar workers and they work at bars and all that.
Oh, okay.
But it was fun meeting other Filipinos like in communities dotted around Japan.
If you were to just reflect for a few moments, could you think of like a major challenge that you have faced living abroad, and would you say that you're still contending with this main challenge that you have thought, or have you resolved it?
So one of the main challenges you face, I think, generally as a Filipino going abroad is, well, of course, there's the loneliness. If you're just one person moving away, but if you're a group, it's actually the perspective of the people against Filipinos. Like
Mm,
in Japan, people have been migrating to Japan, or Filipinos have been migrating to Japan for a long time. So a lot of Japanese people have a set expectation. They actually have a manga or a comic of a Filipino woman marrying a Japanese man, and they
oh,
explain the
okay.
cultural differences and the challenges that they've went through. And this is not set in Tokyo; it's set in the countryside, so it's even more difficult because people in the countryside are less globalized.
Mm,
They're less understanding of other cultures. I rarely use the taxis here because they're super expensive, like times 10 the amount that we pay in the Philippines. And when taxi drivers engage me in conversation and then they think I am Japanese when I speak, but when I say I am from the Philippines, they get surprised. I come in work in a suit and tie.
yeah,
That's something usual here in Japan. So
yeah,
that was before. So in my
yeah,
new role, I don't really do that. Everybody's working from home most of the time.
yeah,
It's a tech company, so they're more relaxed. But back then, I was a consultant, so I had to come in a suit and tie. So they wouldn't notice I'm Filipino until I would actually speak or tell them. And I learned that some of their perspective are good. But obviously, the thing that they would say is the good,
yeah. Good side
um,
of what they,
traits of
yeah,
Filipinos.
good
They would say,
traits. Yeah,
oh, Filipinos, I usually see are hardworking. And
yeah,
from the coworkers and the friends that I meet when I talk about Manila and I talk about Filipino culture, they,
mm,
so that's how Filipino is,
mm,
because they're not really exposed to that. I
mm,
mean, Filipino culture isn't really as famous as it is then
mm,
compared to now. Now I've seen a lot of like Filipino content creators that are abroad, mostly around food, revolving around
yeah,
food culture.
yeah,
But that time, like, yeah, not really famous. So one thing that you have to contend with is the local perspective against you, because they
yeah,
might have like already a general idea or a very, skewed
yeah.
perspective of what a Filipino is.
Right. Okay. I can, definitely relate to what you said because there's definitely a bias here as well when it comes to how Filipinos are recognized. As most people would know, Filipinos are mostly nurses as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm I'm not sure if New Zealand has an aging population, but there's definitely a huge market here for retirement homes, and a lot of the staff there are Filipino. So yeah, so that's the general reputation I've noticed for Filipinos, at least here, like very nurturing and hardworking. And it's a bit of pressure to uphold that sentiment
Hmm.
in my own way, but anyway, I was also going to ask in terms of you adjusting to your new lifestyle abroad, because
Hmm.
definitely living alone, there's a huge change even with the smallest of things. So
Yeah.
how did you find that transition of, you know?
Yeah, in the sense of lifestyle, I didn't really have a solo lifestyle when I was in the Philippines. Although I was quite a bit of a loner, I still living, I think, as much as it's usual for our generation, where you just stay with your family. Number
Yeah.
one, because it wasn't practical to rent an apartment, because
Mhm.
it would be just wasting money when you can just live with your parents and
Yes.
with your family. For me, my entire way of living alone was developed in Japan because this is
Yes.
the first time I lived
Yeah.
alone. Uh, so one of the key challenges, of course, is your daily routines and your weekly chores that you have to do. So things that other people would do for me back in the Philippines, where we used to hire help to help iron, help do the laundry. That is something that I have to do for myself now. So I was fortunate enough that all the places I've stayed here in Japan have their own washing machine. Not all
Yeah.
places have that. Like on the cheaper places, you share bathrooms with
Yeah.
the other tenants, or you don't have space for your washing machine. So what do? You have to go to an outside laundromat, or a
Yeah.
coin laundry is how they describe it, to do your clothes.
Yeah.
So for other people, that's quite a challenge, because you have to really cut out like 2 hours of your day to do that.
Yeah.
2 hours within a week. So
Yeah.
that's sort of a challenge. And of course, cooking your own food, I was never really good at cooking. And actually, in Japan, that's where I developed the skill, because you don't want to eat out always, and Family Mart food and 7-Eleven food, and the triangle rice, it won't carry you so far. You're gonna
Yeah.
get tired of it. You're gonna miss home cooked food. YouTube has been a huge help, like how
Everything
to
else.
you to
Yeah.
yeah to cook pasta. I never cooked pasta. It taught me how to cook beef stew, which is my favorite thing to make, because I would order beef off of Amazon, if you can believe it. And then what's interesting is the guys who sell beef on Amazon, they're like local farmers. So this is like
Wow.
farm to table. They cut the cut you want, and then they send it to you. And it usually, once you order it, it takes 1 or 2 days to arrive at your doorstep, and the meat is as fresh as it can be in the butchers. But butchers is still the best,
Yeah.
obviously.
Wow.
So
That's
I
cool.
learned how to cook like beef stew. Like I do this creamy mushroom, spinach, chicken that I learned. And cooking is now something that I enjoy doing. It's like doing a science experiment for a kid, but more
Yeah.
controlled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
So it's the daily things. The daily things is always a challenge. The small stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Same, because I didn't know how to cook as well. I didn't have any life skills, basically. Any life skills, non existent. So, yeah, it's quite the adjustment. But moving on, I was also curious in terms of the realizations you ended up having, especially when you start looking back to your previous life, so to speak, in the Philippines. If you
Hmm.
could share a few things you've reflected on and realized now that you have extensive experience living abroad, what would those be?
The main thing, I guess, the main thing that I learned, and one of the most useful things that I've learned, is not to be too hard on yourself. In the Philippines, it's you have your family there. You're used to things going your way. There might have been some failures, but there's a safety net that you have, and you set that expectation for yourself that I have to succeed. Well, especially considering my background, my family is not the wealthiest.
Mm,
So I set myself an expectation that I have to succeed. I have to be an executive or a manager and earn X amount of money so I can have a car and blah blah blah. What parents, I think, in my generation were expecting was you go through college and you get a corporate job, and from there you
yeah.
just climb the ladder and earn a lot of money, which
Mm,
I guess a lot of my peers went through, and they did that. But for me, since I had the opportunity to go to Japan, it's like resetting your counter, right? You resetting your experience points. Basically, when you arrive in Japan, you're back to square one,
yeah.
and now you don't have the safety net. Now you don't have people to fall back on, and things are gonna fail, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be from making a mistake in doing laundry, or putting too much soap, or breaking plate while you're washing it, to more serious things like offending someone in work because you didn't say the right thing, or you did something that in Japanese culture could be construed as offensive.
Mm,
Although you try and prepare and understand what those things are to try and avoid them, inevitably something is going to go wrong because there's too much cultural difference, or there's too big of a communication barrier. Things might
mm,
go wrong. And sometimes there are things that are outside your control, but you say, this is something that I could have done better, or it's my fault. It's my fault
yeah,
that you're taking everything in. And it's not a good way to live, because it's a spiral to
yeah,
depression. And
yeah,
there's no one that's going to bring you out of it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. When you feel down, you can try and call someone, but they're not there with you. They're just
Mm,
you're just a voice on a speaker. And it's funny you mentioned like the nuances of Japanese culture because I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and from what I can see, I'm perceiving it to be quite the minefield, you know. And does it at some level make you a bit paranoid?
it was at first, but
Yeah,
then you have to know how to live with your surroundings. So you have to adapt, right?
yeah,
So the what was once suffocating was something that you now learn
mm,
to maneuver around.
mm,
So in emails, for example, I'm used to going through talking to executives very straightforward. Like when I schedule meetings with directors and managers and officers, CEO, whatever, in companies, I would just say, "Hey, so and so, I would like to set up a meeting with you." Blah blah
mm,
blah. Here you have to go through their executive assistants. Here you have to go through the right hierarchy of people. I'm very used to the Western style of just being direct, while in
mm,
the Eastern style, it's more respecting the hierarchy. For example, one of the key things that in my role as a consultant was affecting change in the company via process improvement, which is my main line of work before. Before I used to say, okay, I create a project, I show it to your stakeholders, and they say, hey, this is great, go ahead and do it.
mm.
Here, hey, this is my project. Okay, go ahead and do it, they would say. But you just don't go ahead and do it. You have to talk to everyone surrounding it. Meaning, if your project is attacking, say, the accounting department, so you talk to the head of accounting, then below that is the head of accounts receivable, accounts payable, and everything in between, and that's what they call nemawashi. So at the end of the day, the moment you actually do your process improvement, everyone knows about it and everyone agrees. So it takes a long time. So
Yeah,
it yeah, it's something that you have to be patient about and to work on moving forward, because that's how they
yeah,
work. I mean, you're not going to change, or the culture of a company won't change, or the way the Japanese would do things won't change in a single year, or 10 years, or 20.
yeah.
It's a constant battle, right?
That's interesting because you'd think Japan is the place where innovation happens, but
Yeah.
then it's surrounded by this backdrop of red tape. But yeah, that was my perspective of Japan. Like, it's the
Yeah,
place
we
for.
all put Japan on a pedestal, right? That there's this country of like super complicated innovation and high
Yeah,
tech stuff. Yeah, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of things here that are stuck in the old ways, as
yeah.
is like for most of Eastern culture, I guess.
Mm. And what's interesting as well is when you said you kind of reset when you move abroad, because I think that was the biggest realization I had when I was moving abroad was I started back from zero, but the whole point was to achieve more things. Like there was a certain ceiling back home in the Philippines that you can't just break through unless you knew the right people or you were just that good. Like no matter how hard you worked, that was it.
Hmm.
So in moving abroad, you definitely pay the cost of starting back from square one, even -5 for some people. But then the hope is in this new rule set, so to speak, you hopefully break through your previous ceiling through your own efforts and you actually realize what you can really achieve on your own.
Hmm.
And that's both a blessing and somewhat scary because you also mentioned that it's very easy to be hard on yourself because, like, for me, the reason I was hard on myself was because I didn't have any excuse anymore to not do well. Like, I couldn't blame the Philippines for
It's all
my
on you.
fail. Yeah, it's all me. So if this is the height of my achievement living abroad, like, that's it. That's
You
me.
live
Like,
with that. Mm.
yeah, so I have to, like, you know, face that fact that I could be doing better, but maybe I'm not. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
we're no longer children where they say that your dreams can come true. We realize that you're, yeah, what you want and the world is different. So you
yeah,
have to learn to live with reality versus dreaming
yeah,
like this is the extent of what
yeah,
you are capable of.
yeah. So yeah, it's I don't know. I'm still struggling with that, but anyway, we'll
Yeah,
figure
because
things
it's
out.
such a hard thing, right? When they say ever since you were a child, you can be. They say you can be whoever you want to be,
Yeah,
and then as you grow older, you develop your own personality, and you understand that sometimes there is a huge amount of variables that affect your success in life. So
mm,
it could be the people you know, the amount of effort that you can apply or you're willing to apply, the environment you're in, so whether you're in the Philippines or you're abroad, luck, to be honest.
mm,
And yeah, so you realize that as you live your life, doors close. So you see a path,
yeah,
the only available path you can walk. So
yeah,
it's hard to say that hanggang dito na lang ako. This is my limit.
yeah, yeah. Which is something I used to say to myself. That's why I left the Philippines. Was like I felt something else was holding me back, and that
Mm.
on some level gave me comfort because I couldn't really blame myself. I could hide behind that excuse, but now if if I don't reach my potential, it's my fault because I'm here already.
Mm.
And I kind of honed in on what you just said now, where you mentioned doors close, because definitely when you move abroad, doors definitely close. Like, there's sacrifices that we make whether we know it or not. And for me, at least, I was so naive when I left that I didn't really know what I was giving up until I got there. And the main thing for me was relationships, especially with my nieces, because I'm the youngest in the family. So I have siblings who have kids, and I didn't get to see them grow up. So that was a big sacrifice that I didn't know I was going to make. But yeah, in your perspective, what were I guess you could say sacrifices, you could say challenges, but what were the things that you felt were the most valuable things that you had to, like, let go of?
Definitely, one of the key things were friendships.
Mm,
I have a lot of close friends back in the Philippines that now I don't get to talk to at
mm,
all. Of course, because everyone has their own schedule, considering you are in a different country. I
mm,
mean, the time zone difference is there, 1 hour from the Philippines to Japan. But you can't just ask people to go meet you and have some coffee. The work colleagues that I've had, like I've really grown close to, my mentors and my bosses that I have left when I moved to other companies or other spaces. I used to go once a month out with friends or with work colleagues for some fun, and that's something that I miss. Although you can do the same here, the atmosphere is quite different. Even in bars and party areas, there's still a quite uptight atmosphere, and
mm.
until they get drunk, that's when all hell breaks loose. But you miss the Filipino way of celebration.
Yeah.
Relationships with friends and family, there's still that safety net that, oh, my sister's there, my mom is there, and so on. Yeah, as I said, when you go here, it's all on you. There's no safety net anymore, and that safety net is something that you dearly miss because it's not just simply for your convenience as well, right? Family, those friends that you have, it's something that you've cultivated for years, and now you've left them. Because I
Mm,
have friends that I've met since grade school that I've been close with for decades at that point,
yeah.
and once you leave, You don't get to talk to them a lot anymore.
Yeah. And speaking of relationships, I'm curious when it comes to having a relationship with a, well, not romantic, just a relationship in general with Japanese people. How would you compare that to a typical relationship you'd have with a Filipino person? Like, are there interesting nuances that are only present when it comes to being friends with a Japanese person
Mm.
or getting to know
Well,
them?
the time I came here, I was already very familiar with the Japanese way of doing things, Japanese culture in general. So I didn't really step on a lot of mines when I
Oh,
talked
okay.
to Japanese people because I knew what to avoid. But as I said before, there are some times that you just fail to do it. Actually, a lot of my friends here are non-Japanese foreigners as well, specifically because it's easier to communicate with them in English and all
Yeah.
that. I mean, it was non-Filipino foreigners.
Mm,
So I have a German friend, I have a Chinese friend who I used to work with, who
mm.
keeps asking me questions about how to do things with work because I was their senior. But in terms of like talking to Japanese, you have to understand that sometimes they say something but they mean something else. Uh,
That's great.
it's like you're an investigator sometimes. Like
Yeah.
this is what they say, especially in the context of the office,
Yeah.
right? You don't want to offend anyone. Yeah, you want to keep the boat. You don't want to rock it.
Mm.
Um, in the context of just casual conversation, rarely would Japanese people just approach and talk to you. Actually, I would be the one to approach them and talk to them when if I have any questions. Or
Yeah.
they're usually just shy out of the context of shopping or work. Like if you're walking down the street, no one would just talk to you and say blah 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 blah. Like, or if you're waiting on the sidewalk,
They just
no one,
ghost
no
you,
one,
just
yeah.
pass you by. Wow. Okay. Feels
Unless,
quite cold.
yeah. So unless you meet someone via dating apps or you
Yeah.
know them through work, it's uh, you have to really make yourself available by going to bars and talking to women, Japanese women, or getting Japanese friends that way. And it's not really my scene. I don't
Yeah.
really like going to bars. That's the case here.
Now that you've lived a couple of years in Japan, how do you feel in general about your decision to move abroad?
I think it was a good decision.
Mm.
Not just because you earn more compared to what you did in the Philippines, but also the decision to live alone. There were some things that you realize about yourself that you won't unless you face it. You face that, that darkness inside of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there will be dark points when you're living alone and
Yeah.
things won't always go your way. It's almost an inevitability
Mm.
that you will try and reflect what happened wrong, that you will blame yourself,
Mm.
and you will scrutinize every single move that you do. Was it right? Was it wrong?
Yeah.
And that all leads to a downward spiral of overthinking and taking blame for things that are out of your control. And
Mm.
that leads you to a dark part of yourself where
Mm.
from your perspective initially from the Philippines where everything is optimistic, now it is tempered, much more realistic, I guess.
Yeah. Slightly
Uh,
paranoid.
yeah,
Out of self-preservation.
you have to adapt to your current surroundings and
Yeah.
to survive. Of course, like the basic human instinct to survive. You can't afford to let yourself stay in that dark place. You have to
Yeah.
focus on something outside of that and push yourself out of it.
Yeah. That's true. Because I remember when I, like, after like a week or so living alone, when you're sleeping at night and you can't really sleep, you just think.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized how much of my life had family and friends in it that when I took that out, I felt empty. And that scared me. Like knowing how, you know, how bare my life was now that I've taken out, or and I didn't know I was gonna take it out to that extent. Like I pulled out a part of myself, and I just felt empty in a place that I didn't know anyone in. So that was scary for me, and I had to fill that with something. So Yeah, that's the hard part. You know, it's definitely like it's um, a thorough examination of who you are as an individual. You take out all your roots, you're just left with who you are now, and you have to contend with that and figure out
Mhm.
if you're happy with what you've got left as a person, or if you need to add on to that, build onto that, because that's all you have because you're on your own. So you need to make do and hopefully make it better. But yeah, it's tough. But anyway, we're about to close, and I just have a few more questions. If you had a few words of advice you'd like to share to anyone who is considering moving abroad, what would those words of advice be?
Hmm. If you were someone trying to move to a different country, know the things that you have to sacrifice and really think if you can sacrifice them.
Mm,
For me, I didn't really have any strong roots back in the Philippines. Although I did have good relationships with coworkers, friends, I felt like I had no relationships that was holding me back. I really just didn't think about things back then. Like I saw an opportunity to go to Japan, and I no, well, not really a risk. I just sent that email, and went for it. And when they offered me the job, I said, "Let's go." Didn't even think about it.
yeah,
There are a lot of things that when you start to live alone that you will face mentally, physically, and emotionally that would either, well, most people come out of it, right? Most people come out of it, but whether you come out of it stronger or whether you come out of it in a darker place than before is
yeah,
really up to you. So know that you're going to have to face hardship, not maybe not in the physical sense or monetary sense, because you are going abroad because the opportunity here is greater, things are more convenient, but in the sense of yourself and your emotions and how you think, it will all change once you go out of the bubble that was Philippines.
yeah.
So think very carefully of your decision, understand what you're sacrificing, and be more prepared for abroad than I was.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, yeah, because I think on some level there's a perception of equating being an OFW towards monetary gain, and that's it. Like that's the embodiment of being an OFW. You have more money, but there's so much like there's layers behind that unfortunately we don't really talk about much. Like the mental strain. Like because back home, I think we obviously face hardship because the Philippines is a poor country, but the culture we have of laughing it off together is such a big deal. Same with your parents being taken care of. That's a business venture here, whereas back home it's just a thing you do out of respect, culturally.
Filial piety, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So there's just things that we take for granted that we thought are given, like having people to laugh off hardship with, or having the support of family when you get older. And yeah, it's not just about making money. There's the mental strain and all that. But okay, last question. If you could say a piece of advice to your former self, the self that was about to move abroad, what would you say to that past Kevin?
Mm, thinking back on it, I would definitely say learn more Japanese. One, because it's not because of practical. Well, yes, number one is practical things, but number two is communication. I wasn't really a people person back then, meaning that if I could avoid the human interaction that wasn't required, I'd avoid it. But now, it's not that I crave it, it's just that it's a reality of life that you have to do it. You have
Yeah,
to talk to people, not just with work, but to keep your head in the game,
yeah,
to,
just to live.
Yeah, you don't. You're not. You're gonna go insane if you don't talk to people, because
Yeah,
that's the thing that I took for granted. Because
yeah,
before, I always have to talk to people, like my mom and my sister and my friends and my colleagues. You always have to talk to them. But if you live alone, there are stretches of days that I don't talk. Say I don't wanna go to the park and work out,
yeah,
or this is the weekend that I'm just gonna stay at home and laze,
yeah,
and then for that entire weekend I won't talk. I was just social media
yeah,
and everything. So learn how to communicate better, because that's something I had to learn the hard way. To learn more Japanese and so on, to interact with people, because Japanese people are generally friendly, and
yeah.
even if they don't approach you, if you approach them in a very polite and respectful manner, they'll reciprocate.
Mm.
So be conscious of that, conscious of communication, and how essential it is to, number one, succeed at work, and number two, keep yourself sane.
Yeah, keeping yourself sane. Because I'm the same. I'm not really sociable, but I definitely need to fill the tank, like the social tank. Like I'll just need to talk to people, and then I'll be good for a couple of days. Then I'll need to refill, so to speak. But thanks, Kevin, for spending your time with me today. Is there anything you'd like to share or promote? Or
No, I do not have an online business. I am I'm focused specifically on my work as a company employee.
yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
okay.
So yeah,
Anyway,
thanks Lance for giving this opportunity, and
no, thank you.
I
I'm
hope your
glad to.
listeners or viewers would take something out of our conversation here.
Yes, yes, and thank you as well for being the first guest.